If you want to know what to do when the shoulders elevate during the push-pull assessment, watch this video. The push-pull assessment is actually a really great assessment to take a look at what's going on, especially in the shoulders. There's some other kinetic chain checkpoints that you guys learn about in NASM. For me, I'm primarily looking at what's going on here at the neck and the traps. And part of this you'll find oftentimes is coaching and cueing with pushing and pulling exercises. People just not knowing what it's supposed to feel like, what's supposed to be engaged. But if we do feel like there are some overactive and underactive issues happening here, right? The shoulders are elevating as they're doing either one. The nice thing for you guys, it's the same overactive and underactive muscles. And when it comes to the overactivity, right, too much signal, we're looking at the levator scapulae and the upper traps, which some of you guys might relate to this, right? As you're sitting there watching this video right now, how many of you guys find yourself trying to get some relief on the neck and traps? It's super common, me as well, right? Especially if I start doing some overhead work, which is why it's just a really important one for us to address and to think about. So step one is gonna be saying, how can we down-regulate some of the overactivity, right? You might call that mobility flexibility work, and I'm gonna show you guys a very simple one. And then the next step is gonna say, let's take those underactive muscles, specifically the lower traps, right? The muscles that help to depress the scapula and the shoulder blade, and let's make sure we're doing not just some warm-up exercises, but even some strengthening exercises to get them firing. I'm gonna simplify your guys' life, and I'm gonna give you guys my favorite mobility drill to do for this area of the body. Literally one that I do personally almost every day, and it's definitely one that I use with clients who I feel like probably have some neck and trap and shoulder issues, whether it has shown up in this push-pull assessment with the shoulders elevating, or whether I find them just getting into that position during other exercises, or even if they complain of like neck and trap pain. Again, we're not here just to get people out of pain, but this can be a really great one to down-regulate. And if you guys have gone through your NASM material, in the flexibility chapters, they talk about self-myofascial release, and they showcase things like tennis balls and lacrosse balls, but there's not a lot of content that goes through it. So I'm gonna give you guys a very simple one. First off, if you're new to this stuff, if you've never really lacrosse balled your traps before, I'm gonna recommend you use a tennis ball because it's a little bit nicer. It's a little bit more forgiving. You're gonna lay on this thing and it's gonna hurt. And so for a lot of your clients, that's probably a really great place to start too, starting with something that's a little bit softer. But just so you guys can see, I'm gonna show you guys with the lacrosse ball. So the idea here is we've got all these muscles, right? Not just our mid and upper traps, but everything that's connecting here to the shoulder blade, that if we're gonna be doing pushing and pulling exercises, right, these muscles, they're either gonna be working or they're gonna be isometrically controlling. And that's what we're looking for in that push-pull. So we just want to say, hey, if we've got too much activity, tightness, overactivity, by creating a little bit of pressure, can we do a little self-myofascial release to down-regulate that so that we can keep them in better positions? So best place to start with this is just find a spot. It's right on the inside. We don't want to be on the shoulder blade and scapula itself, but right on the inside. And where at, honestly, you can work up and down. I'm going to show you how. Usually I'll start right on this upper portion, right inside the scapula, and start out just by lying down. Key here, you want to be able to breathe. So if you're doing this with a client and you see them like holding their breath, tell them to relax for a second. You want to be able to breathe because we want to make sure that we're activating the parasympathetic nervous system, right? Relaxation. And so the cool part about this is you don't have to roll your body around. We're going to take advantage of the movement of the actual arm. Because especially if we're looking to prep somebody for pushing and pulling or overhead pressing, just going through, right? I just have my body weight and I'm just gonna take that shoulder through a nice range of motion. And what you'll find, especially as that arm gets closer to overhead, not everyone's gonna be able to get down, that's okay. But the motion of the shoulder blade is kind of like pulling that muscle through a bigger range of motion. And so if you do have any overactivity or some junk going on there, this is gonna feel really good, but maybe also a little bit painful, right? The key is you wanna be able to breathe through it. So from there, if I want to move further up, even closer to, let's say, like the levator scapulae, which is really at the top of the shoulder blade, I'm just slightly moving the ball up, and then I'm just doing the same thing. Nice inhales and exhales. If I want to make it a little bit more intense, I can bridge up. It just puts more of my body weight down, and that's all we're doing, nice and slow. If I'm you guys, don't spend more than maybe 60 to 90 seconds doing this on each side the first time, and then coming right up off that lacrosse ball. And you'll find if that is an overactive area, they're gonna get up, or you're gonna get up and you're gonna be like, wow, I feel like I have a whole new set of shoulders. And now that we've done a little bit of mobility and we've addressed the overactive muscles, when we take a look at the underactive muscles, what we really wanna do is figure out just how can we strengthen these. And the lower traps are a very common one for a lot of people because it's just not a position that many of us train in. And especially if we're looking at the push-pull assessment, the role of those lower traps to depress the shoulder blade is really isometric. It's controlling that. So the first one I want to show you guys is probably the least aggressive of the three. And this one would almost be considered like a corrective exercise, activation of those muscles. And it's the prone Y raise. And you'll see a lot of people do this one directly from the ground, but I'm gonna show you guys on the bench because if you start from the ground, you don't have a lot of range of motion to go through. You're actually starting in a pretty extreme range of motion. So I like to use the bench because you'll see we get to go through a bigger range, which if someone already struggles here, we wanna give them a version to succeed with first before going to the more challenging ones. So what we wanna do here, and you can play with your angle. We could go up or down here. Right now I have it a little bit less than a 45-degree angle, and I wanna have my chest and my chin off the bench. And the real goal here is trying not to strain through my head and my neck and try to stay somewhat relaxed there. But easiest way I would describe it too, create just a loose fist with your hands, thumbs are up, and you want to think about a Y, right? It's a prone Y raise. It's not a T, it's not an I, but somewhere right in between, because that's a very natural motion of the shoulder blade, and the lower traps have to work to help bring it up and keep it there. So chin is tucked and relaxed, thumbs coming up into that Y, hold for a second, and slow, nice and easy, right back down. Bringing those hands up, hold for a second, slow, right back down. If I'm doing this as like a prep exercise or a prime exercise in my warm-up, I'm doing 8 to 12 reps. I'm doing a little isometric at that end range. And you'll find for some people, if they really struggle with that, what you can do is start out with one hand. Same motion, other hand can just support under the bench. And sometimes just doing one at a time might allow for some better range of motion, better technique and form. And as you have clients that get stronger with that exercise, over time we can add very light weights. It doesn't take much. For most people, just hands, but adding 2, 3, 4, 5 pound dumbbells over time can help to strengthen those. This next exercise, bench depressions, is actually us just training that scapular depression, right? The shoulder blades do a lot of things. We don't want them elevating as much when we're doing these push-pull exercises, so it makes sense that we would try to train that depression. So we're actually gonna take advantage of the bench. Just wanna have a bench that's about hip level. You got about 90-degree bend of the knee, and we're placing a little bit of weight into the hands. And so the thing I like about this is you can kind of moderate how much your legs are helping, and we're just really trying to let those shoulders, right, let gravity win a little bit where my body sinks down towards my ears, and then exhale and press through that bench. And when I do that, I'm trying to create as much space between my shoulders and my ears as possible. Hold that for a second so we get that isometric, nice and slow control back down, and perform somewhere between 8 to 12 reps of these in your warm-up. This third exercise for the lower traps is truly a strengthening exercise because for me, as we look at these underactive muscles, we do want to do some activation. That was that prone Y raise. And then we do want to do a little bit more active depression. And then the third one is we just want to make sure that we're training, especially pulling exercises with the right technique and position. So one of my favorite ones to do that is just the chest supported row. I like it because it's also going to reinforce the position that we ran earlier with our Y raises. Probably a similar angle on the bench based upon the limbs of the individual, but the key here is watching, coaching, and cueing what's actually happening at our shoulder blades. Because if I do this exercise and I'm allowing them to row up here, I'm not reinforcing, right? I'm not integrating into my exercise versus thinking about pulling the ribs or the hands back towards the rib cage, elevating the shoulders a little bit. So we're not only now training those lower traps, but we're also integrating into our pulling exercise, which is really what we want to fix in the long term anyways. So you'll find this is an exercise you're going to want to start with much lighter dumbbells than you might normally dumbbell row because you can't use momentum. You're very isolated here on the bench. And then thinking about pulling those dumbbells right to the rib cage. Isometric hold, slow back down. Exhale, hold for a second, make sure, and the reason I like that ISO is not just so that we're training the isometric, but we're also making sure we've got time to coach any changes in the shoulder blade position as we're trying to improve, strengthen those lower traps. I know knowing what to do with some of the assessments and understanding the overactive and underactive muscles can be challenging for a lot of people. So hopefully this video was helpful in giving you some strategies on what to do about the shoulders elevating during that push-pull assessment. And if you're still in the process of studying to become a personal trainer, make sure you check out the links in the description below for free resources and information on how you can work with us at the Axiom Academy.